Welcome to Sino-Warfare with Ralph D. Sawyer. Anyone who has struggled with the art of war will have quickly noticed it consists of extremely short paragraphs, sometimes only single sentences, with little or no apparent connection to each other or to the chapter's title. Though many scholars don't agree, I believe this largely resulted from having to write on narrow bamboo strips that could only contain something like 20 to 25 characters. Paper didn't become available until comparatively late in human civilization. Before that, anyone who wanted to create a document or record their thoughts had to resort to bark, papyrus, vellum, leather, cloth, or silk. In China, prior to about the 4th century AD, bamboo strips of roughly uniform width and length provided virtually the sole medium for writing characters with a brush and ink. These bamboo strips were neither inexpensive nor readily available. Furthermore, they had to be laboriously produced by splitting large diameter bamboo combs like this between the nodes down here into the desired width and then processed. Being indigenous to southern China below the sweep of the Yellow River, the strips also had to be transported a considerable distance to be used for historical records and administrative tallies in China's far-flung states. When I tried to write a couple of paragraphs in Chinese on them, I discovered they weren't just inconvenient, but also highly constraining. This probably accounts, in my opinion, for the laconic, sometimes enigmatic nature of the art of war's pronouncements, as well as those in the Analects, the famous compilation of Confucius's teachings. In addition, anything longer than 25 characters requires more strips that have to be assembled in proper sequence to produce a book, as you can see from this modern art of war replica. Stringing the strips together turns out to be a cumbersome process that can be extremely frustrating if you forget to number them. It's a problem that plagues any bamboo text whose bindings snap or decay, especially the recently discovered tomb texts. Discursive writing would become much more common in a couple of centuries, but oral teaching and oral transmission were primary in Sunzi's era, just as in other cultures before the appearance of convenient writing materials. This probably accounts for the extensive use of numbers, a well-known aid to memory for factors and aspects. Sunzi reportedly presented a physical book to King Helu. However, it's likely the contents were intended merely as starting points, basically notes for verbal expansion similar to the talking points of a PowerPoint presentation. As the book was transmitted down through the centuries, later thinkers and editors almost certainly rearranged the strips, accounting for the differences between the historically received copy we read now and the tomb text versions. The art of war opens by boldly asserting, warfare is the greatest affair of state. And then it goes on to explain why. It's the basis of life and death, the Tao to survival or extinction. Now, it might be thought nothing could have been clearer amid the unremitting warfare of the late spring and autumn, an era marked by several significant battles which should have been known to Sunzi in greater or lesser detail. And incidentally, a few are already discussed in the first 3 battle talks, which are already up. You can also find several important clashes from Sunzi era, including Boju, as well as the famous Battle of Lizhou River, at which Yue vanquished Wu, discussed in some detail in the historical introduction to my single-volume Art of War translation. By Sunzi's time, commanders had long been analyzing the enemy and pondering tactics. Nevertheless, in a realm in which some were still fervently proclaiming righteousness and ritual to be the sole means to peace and stability, turning the focus onto warfare itself was a revolutionary act. Furthermore, by saying it must be thoroughly pondered and analyzed, Sunzi transformed it into an object of conscious study. His brief pronouncement essentially sounded the death knell for the old warrior culture and signaled the emergence of the profession of arms. Thereafter, embarking on expeditionary campaigns shouldn't be a matter of the royal desire, whether for goods, striving for power, or lust for another ruler's wife. Nor should clashes be prompted by emotional quests for revenge or motivated by popular rancor. Thus, in his chapter on incendiary warfare states,
If it isn't advantageous, don't move. If objectives can't be obtained, don't employ the army. Unless endangered, don't engage in warfare. The ruler cannot mobilize the army out of personal anger. The general cannot engage in battle because of personal frustration. When it is advantageous, move. When not advantageous, stop. Anger can revert to happiness. Annoyance can revert to joy. But a vanquished state cannot be revived. The dead cannot be brought back to life.
knowledge and experience are required to master military complexity, rationality to decide whether to engage in warfare, and wisdom to formulate strategy and tactics. Of course, throughout the centuries, the problem with profundity has always been realizing it. Fortunately, this is what the remainder of the art of war is about. Much as in ancient Rome, in Swin's time, divination was still being employed for important state affairs, including warfare. In the Shang, diviners read the cracks induced by heating turtle plastrons to determine the response, which was quite nebulous. However, the Zhou abandoned this method for a form of kleromancy, the casting of milfoil stocks, to determine the hexagrams that would eventually be compiled into the well-known I Ching. Swinza then summarily rejected his approach by emphasizing human intelligence. Advanced knowledge cannot be gained from ghosts or spirits, inferred from phenomena, or projected from the measures of heaven, but must be gained from men to be the knowledge of the enemy's true situation. It's a belief that underpins the use of spies described in the chapter Employing Spies, the world's first critical examination of spycraft, which we will consider separately. The art of war, therefore, advocates gathering information about a number of critical factors. However, these aren't simple facts, but instead comparative assessments developed by, for example, asking whose forces are stronger. Values are then assigned to all the important aspects, and a final comparative weighing or net assessment performed, another world's first, probably by using counting sticks and some sort of tally board. Nevertheless, no doubt to acknowledge tradition and gain the sanction of the ancestral spirits, Swinza asserts it must be done in the state temple. The results should then be regarded as definitive. As he says, before the engagement, one who determines in the ancestral temple that he will be victorious has found the majority of factors are in his favor, while one who determines he will not be victorious has found few factors in his favor. From this perspective, victory and defeat will be apparent. Now, of course, sometimes states are invaded. War proves unavoidable, or headstrong leadership decides to fight for political reasons. While the commander should still determine the probability of victory before actually engaging in any battle, gaining victory requires adopting the insights provided by critical concepts and implementing the tactical measures that can be derived from the patterns of warfare. While these will be the subject of later talks, we might note that they are founded on manipulating the enemy and creating the circumstances required for victory. But even before this stage is reached, the art of war suggests two options: maintaining a strong defensive posture and the highly esoteric idea of achieving victory without fighting. Swinza emphasized the role of assuming a defensive posture more than once.
If you can't be victorious, assume a defensive posture. If you can be victorious, attack. In the former circumstance, by assuming a defensive posture, the army's strength will be more than adequate, whereas it will be inadequate in offensive actions.
The underlying reason is quite simple. Prior to the deployment of cannon and the extensive use of gunpowder in siege warfare, troops protected by reasonably solid fortifications, especially the immense tamped earth walls surrounding early Chinese cities, enjoyed an advantage of at least 3 or 4 to 1 over their attackers, though somewhat less when deployed for open field battle. However, as Swinza separately asserts, The victorious army first realizes the conditions for victory, then seeks to engage in battle. The vanquished army engages first, then seeks victory. Even better than being compelled to defend is thwarting the enemy from the outset, keeping them from attacking or evading. When well conceived and effectively executed, diplomatic, coercive, and subversive methods may result in subjugating other states without any clash of arms. As Swinza famously said,
Attaining 100 victories in 100 battles is not the pinnacle of excellence. Subjugating the enemy's army without fighting is the true pinnacle of excellence.
balking the enemy's plans ranks highest in the strategic hierarchy.
The highest realization of warfare is attacking the enemy's plans. Next is attacking their alliances. Next, attacking their army. And the lowest, attacking their fortified cities. Someone who excels at employing the military subjugates other people's armies without engaging in battle, captures their fortified cities without attacking them, and destroys their states without prolonged fighting. He must fight under heaven with the paramount aim of preservation. Thus his weapons will not become dull, and the gains can be preserved. This is the strategy for planning offensives.
Material gains were considered critical because of the high cost of conflict. The Art of War devotes more than a couple of paragraphs to the extraordinary impact and the surpassing expense of war, including rampant inflation, the exhaustion of the populace, and the army's decimation. Even more troubling, a powerful neighbor might annihilate a debilitated state. No other justification is required. Next time, we will consider how Swinza's underlying vision affects his approach to warfare. I hope you will join us. As always, thank you for watching. And if you are finding this series at all worthwhile, I hope you'll become a subscriber. It costs nothing and will help ensure our continued visibility.